There comes a moment when something shifts, not outside of you but inside. A switch flips. You stop waiting, you stop hesitating, you stop begging life to be gentle. You look at yourself in the mirror, and for the first time you don't see potential. You see power, you see a decision, and this is what starts to happen. You begin to move different, not slower, not faster, but with purpose. Every step is no longer hoping things will work. It's knowing they will. You're no longer asking if you're ready. You're walking into the fire because you understand. Readiness is born in the fire. It's not given, it's forged. The moment you truly commit, life starts to rearrange itself in your favor. Not because the universe owes you anything, but because your energy becomes undeniable. You stop broadcasting uncertainty. You radiate clarity. You don't ask for attention. You command it without saying a word. People start to feel your presence before you speak. They listen, not because you yell, but because your silence holds weight. Discipline no longer feels like punishment. It becomes your identity, waking up early. Non-negotiable, saying no to distractions, automatic, choosing long, term gains over short-term pleasure, that's your oxygen now. Every sacrifice becomes sacred. Every ounce of pain becomes a signal, not an enemy. And in that pain you find fuel. You don't escape the struggle, you hunt it, because that's where the edge lies. Then you stop chasing people. You stop trying to explain your worth. You realize those who can't see your value simply aren't qualified to judge it. So you build in silence, you grow in shadows, you let your results do the talking, and suddenly people start to ask, what changed? They try to understand how you're doing it, but they didn't see the nights you kept going when everything in you said stop. They didn't feel the weight you carried when no one was clapping for you, but you remember, you carry those scars like armor. Now, you don't wait for doors to open, you build your own. You don't beg for opportunity. You create it, you find the cracks, you study the patterns, you make the moves others are too afraid to make, because fear isn't your master anymore. It's your compass. When something scares you, that's the sign. It's time to go straight toward it. You no longer entertain doubt. Doubt is for spectators. You're in the arena, and while others talk about what they could do, you're doing it, not perfectly, but relentlessly, and that alone makes you untouchable. Because talent without execution is nothing, but effort without excuse, that's unstoppable. Then something wild happens. Your presence starts to intimidate the average, not because you're arrogant, but because you're certain. You're no longer apologizing for your ambition. You're no longer downplaying your standards. You raise the bar and make no apologies for it, and the real ones rise with you. The rest fall off, and you're okay with that, because the mission is too big for dead weight. And now reality starts to bend, not because of luck, not because of coincidence, but because of persistence. You show up so consistently, so fiercely, that the world has no choice but to respond. Results that once seemed impossible begin to look inevitable. People start to say you're lucky, but deep down you know you built this, in silence, in sweat, in solitude, and this is what starts to happen. You rise from indecision into clarity, from waiting into doing, from dreaming into dominating. You no longer live on hope, you move with certainty, you take full ownership, not just of your wins, but of your losses. And in that ownership you become dangerous, because a person who owns everything can be stopped by nothing. The weak will say you've changed, the strong will ask how, but you won't answer. You don't have time to explain. You're too busy building, too busy becoming, too focused on what's next, because now you understand discipline is freedom, sacrifice is the shortcut, pain is the price, and results are your proof. And this is just the beginning. The moment you truly commit, life rearranges itself in your favor, not just gradually, not quietly, but with force. Invisible pieces start moving. Doors you never noticed begin to unlock. People you've never met start talking about you. The world senses when someone is no longer playing games with their potential, when someone burns the bridges behind them and removes the plan B, when someone decides, not hopes, not wishes, but decides, that they're going to rise no matter what. That's when the current of life begins to shift. You feel it in the smallest moments. A message shows up at the right time. An opportunity crosses your path when you least expect it, or a challenge that would have broken you 6 months ago suddenly strengthens you. These things don't happen by accident. They respond to your internal state, your certainty, your absolute refusal to accept anything less than what you know you're meant, for commitment isn't just saying I will. Commitment is cutting off every excuse. It's shutting the door to distraction. It's looking at every failure not as a stopping point, but as a signal to keep going harder. When you operate from that level of certainty, the universe has no choice but to respond. You become magnetic, not in a fantasy sense, but in the real grounded way that comes from obsession. You develop tunnel vision, your energy sharpens, you walk differently, you speak differently, people sense it. They don't always know why, but they feel it, and most importantly, you feel it. That fire that once flickered under yourself, doubt begins to blaze, and it won't be silenced by fear or fatigue. It only grows stronger with pressure. You start waking up with intention, not because someone told you to, not because of motivation quotes, but because you now know who you are, and that knowledge becomes more powerful than any external push. You stop negotiating with your weaknesses. You stop entertaining thoughts that drag you backwards. You cut them off like dead weight. You become ruthless with your time, your energy, and your focus. That's not arrogance. That's clarity, and clarity is rare. It's what makes you untouchable to the undisciplined and unstoppable to those who once doubted you. You no longer care to be understood. You don't need applause. You're not here to be liked. You're here to fulfill. To build, to conquer the thing inside you that refuses to settle everything you used to see as struggle starts to look different. Rejection, that's redirection. Pain, that's growth. Delays, that's preparation. You begin to see life as a test, and you start showing up prepared to pass. You stop complaining about what you don't have, and start using everything you do have. You stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10. You understand now real success is earned in silence, built in the dark, and paid for in discipline. You start falling in love with consistency, not because it's easy, but because you've tasted the results. And once you've had a glimpse of what you're capable of, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to average. You can't tolerate your old habits. You can't sit still in mediocrity and call it peace. You realize you don't need permission. You don't need someone to tell you you're ready. You give yourself the green light. You stop waiting to feel confident and start showing up until confidence is a byproduct. You stop wishing for motivation and build systems so strong you move even when the mood disappears. That's power. That's what separates the ones who talk from the ones who deliver. You become addicted, not to success, but to the process. You crave structure, order, momentum. You keep going not because you're fearless, but because you're no longer a slave to fear. And when that happens, every day becomes a battlefield you're ready to win. People won't understand the shift. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right. You have. You had to. Growth required it. Pain demanded it. Purpose pulled it out of you, and you answered without apology, without delay, without turning back. The old you had dreams, the new you has standards. The old you talked, the new you executes. The old you hoped, the new you knows. There's no going back to who you used to be, because you've seen the difference. You've felt the power. You've lived in alignment with your mission, and it's ruined every excuse you used to live behind now. You don't wait for things to happen. You make them happen. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You act and make the moment perfect. You move with faith in yourself, you speak with conviction, you build with intensity, and slowly the life you once fantasized about starts to take form, not because you got lucky, but because you did the work, because you refused to be average, because you chose to become someone who doesn't stop at obstacles but finds a way through them. That's the reward of real commitment, not just achievement, but transformation. And once you experience that transformation, you know this is what starts to happen when you finally stop holding back, when you finally stop playing small, when you finally commit not with your words, but with your actions, your habits, your standards, and your entire life. This is what starts to happen when you become undeniable. Discipline becomes your power. Pain becomes your signal, not your enemy. It stops being something you run from and starts being something you study, something you lean into. You no longer see discomfort as a threat. You see it as the cost of progress, the toll you pay at every checkpoint of growth. You stop asking, how do I make this easier, and start asking, how much pressure can I handle? And the answer over time becomes more than you ever imagined, because discipline doesn't come from feeling good. It comes from doing what must be done long after the mood has left. That's when strength is built. That's where your identity is forged. Each morning you rise before you're ready. Each rep you finish when your body says quit. Each moment you choose progress over pleasure. Those are the bricks. That's the foundation, and soon that discipline hardens into something unshakable. You begin to move from reaction to command. You're no longer thrown around by emotions, distractions, or opinions. You recognize them, but they don't direct your steps. You've trained your mind to listen to your purpose, not your impulses. Your vision starts guiding you more than your feelings ever could. And when pain shows up, and it will, you don't flinch, you don't curse it, you understand it. You welcome it like an old friend that visits to deliver the lesson no one else can, because in that pain there's truth. There's refinement, there's a mirror that reflects who you really are when the pressure's on, and through that reflection you gain power, not the loud kind, the silent kind, the kind that walks into a room and doesn't need to prove anything. The average mind folds when it gets hard. But you're no longer average. You've trained yourself to see difficulty as the doorway, not something to avoid, but something to walk straight through, because you know the discomfort you feel now prevents the regret you'd feel later. And regret, that's the real pain, the kind that haunts you, so instead of running from the challenge, you run toward it. You live by the principle that comfort is a trap dressed up as peace, but peace isn't passive. Real peace comes from knowing you're doing what you said you would, when no one's watching, when everything in you wants to stop. That's how you sleep at night, not from having less stress, but from having more strength. You stop waiting for motivation because you see how fragile it is. One bad mood, one hard day, and it disappears. But discipline is your anchor. It doesn't care how you feel. It only cares that you show up. And the beauty of showing up, even when you don't feel like it, is that eventually your feelings start to follow your actions. You stop being dragged by your mind and start directing it, and each time you show up when it's inconvenient, you train your brain to obey your higher purpose, not your lower urges. That's how real change happens, not through bursts of inspiration, but through relentless repetition. That's how champions are built, quietly, steadily, without shortcuts. Every sacrifice starts to make sense, skipping the party, ignoring the noise, choosing the extra hour of work instead of the easy distraction. Those aren't losses, they're trades you make to buy your future, and the more you trade, the more you realize how little you actually need and how much you're capable of. You simplify, you focus, you strip away everything that doesn't serve the mission, and in that simplicity you find power, you find clarity, you find time others waste, and you use that time to build something no one can take from you. Pain teaches you things success never could. It humbles you, it sharpens you, it introduces you to your limits and then dares you to go beyond them. You stop seeing failure as the end and start seeing it as feedback. You stop thinking mistakes mean you're not good enough and start understanding they're just steps on the path to greatness. And every scar becomes a story of survival. Every setback becomes a setup for your next move. You don't get bitter, you get better. Because you refuse to be broken by what was sent to build you, your discipline starts to separate you. People notice it, even if they don't say it. They feel it in how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you work when others rest, how you keep your word when others quit. They may not say it out loud, but they respect it. And the right ones align with it, the wrong ones fall off. That's the gift of discipline. It not only builds your results, it filters your circle. It attracts those who value growth and repels those who waste it. You realize discipline is freedom. Not restriction, not punishment, but true freedom. The freedom to create the life you want instead of settling for the life that's handed to you. The freedom to respond to chaos with clarity, to face fear with action, to stand firm when others waver. That kind of freedom isn't bought. It's earned through repetition, earned through endurance, earned through the willingness to face pain and not blink, and in time, the struggle that once felt heavy becomes light. The routines that once felt forced become natural. The voice that once said, "You can't," becomes quiet because now you've proven you can, over and over. You've become someone who can be trusted by their future, someone whose actions match their ambition, someone who leads themselves before they lead anyone else. Discipline becomes your power because it makes your words matter. It makes your efforts count. It makes your goals real. And pain once feared becomes the signal that you're on the right track. Every ache is evidence that you're alive, that you're growing, that you're not wasting your time on comfort. You're building a life that outlasts mood, that outlasts doubt, that outlasts the opinions of those too afraid to try, and that, more than anything else, makes you unstoppable. You stop chasing people, and they start paying attention. Not because you changed to impress them, but because you finally understood that chasing drains your power. When you stop running after approval, validation, or attention, your energy shifts. You no longer broadcast desperation. You no longer shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never built for your greatness. Instead, you redirect that same energy inward to your mission, your growth, your execution, and that's when people start to notice. Not because you're loud, but because your silence holds weight. Not because you beg, but because your presence begins to speak volumes. You become undeniable, not because of what you demand from others, but because of what you demand from yourself. The more you elevate, the less you need to explain. You're not available for small talk. You're not checking who watched your story or who replied to your message. You're too focused building a story worth watching. People begin to sense something different. They may not understand what changed, but they feel the shift. They feel the strength in your stillness, and some of them get uncomfortable, because the moment you stop chasing, they lose control. They can no longer manipulate your need to be accepted, because that need no longer exists. You've outgrown it. You're not moved by being included in shallow circles anymore. You're not thirsty for recognition from people who never respected you when you were quiet, grinding. Unseen, you begin to realize that the right people are drawn to purpose. They're pulled by vision. They're magnetized by focus. And when you lock into your path with relentless execution, you no longer have to beg for attention. It shows up, often when you least expect it. Not because you shouted louder, but because you started to shine brighter. You no longer approach relationships with your hand out. You bring value, bring peace, bring clarity. That energy becomes rare, and rarity gets noticed. Not immediately, but inevitably. That's the law. When your value increases, your silence becomes expensive. You don't chase anymore because you've realized what you bring to the table. And now you don't mind eating alone. What used to feel like rejection now feels like redirection. You stop asking why they didn't stay and start thanking life that they left. Because every time someone walks out of your life when you stop chasing them, it's proof they were only staying for the benefit of your pursuit, not the value of your presence. That clarity is painful, but it's also freedom, and once you taste that freedom, you stop apologizing for your distance. You stop forcing connections that don't elevate. You stop performing for an audience that only claps when it benefits them. You don't need the spotlight. You are the light. Your confidence becomes quiet but powerful. You walk into rooms without needing to be seen. You build in silence, knowing that real elevation doesn't require constant announcements. While others are busy curating appearances, you're curating results. While they chase trends, you're setting standards, and eventually they notice, not because you beg them to, but because results are louder than requests. They begin to watch you not for entertainment, but for direction. You become the blueprint they didn't see coming, the one they overlooked until it was undeniable. People start asking how you did it. They want access, not because you were everywhere, but because you became rare. They want your time, not because you were always available, but because you became selective. They want your respect, but now they have to earn it, because you've stopped handing it out freely. You understand now, your time, your focus, your peace. They are currency, and you spend them with wisdom. The version of you that used to chase would have said yes to anything just to feel needed, but now you choose based on alignment, not attachment, and that difference has changed your entire life. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. The grind speaks for you, the progress validates you, and most of all, your self-respect anchors you. You walk away from confusion, you detach from inconsistency. You don't explain your boundaries, you enforce them, and while some people call it cold, it's really clarity. You're not rude, you're focused, you're not arrogant, you're aware. You've simply remembered that you were never meant to chase what doesn't see your value. You were meant to become so valuable that it chases you the moment you stopped chasing people. Your energy came back. You noticed how much lighter you felt when you stopped waiting for replies that never came. You realized how much time you'd wasted trying to convince people to see your worth, and once that awareness hit, everything changed. You stopped begging for seats at tables that weren't built for you. You stopped trying to fit into rooms where your presence was a burden. You started building your own space, and suddenly the people you used to chase started circling back. But now you're not impressed. You're not bitter, you're just better, because you've finally learned that you never needed them. You just needed to believe in yourself enough to stop chasing and start choosing. You choose peace over popularity, purpose over pleasing, standards over settling, and from that posture everything shifts. The invitations come, the recognition grows, the respect multiplies, but now you're no longer moved by applause, because what moves you is impact, what fuels you is growth, what drives you is legacy, and you know none of those things require validation from those who didn't believe in you when you were becoming. You stop chasing people, and you start attracting what's meant for you. You stop proving, and you start producing. You stop explaining, and you start evolving, and the moment that happens, the world starts paying attention, not because you begged it to, but because you finally stepped into your power and refused to give it away to anyone who couldn't handle it. You no longer beg for opportunity. You create it. You stop waiting for the right time, the perfect conditions, or someone to discover your potential. You begin to understand that the people who win in life are not the ones who sit patiently for permission. They're the ones who build doors where none exist. You stop knocking, you start constructing. You stop asking, will someone give me a shot, and start declaring, I'll take my own. And in that mindset, something shifts. You move from victim to creator. You move from hoping to building. You start treating your life like a blueprint, not a lottery. And that shift becomes the foundation of everything you become. You wake up no longer searching for favors. You search for ways to sharpen your skill, expand your reach, and increase your impact. You begin to work like there's no rescue coming, because there isn't. It's you, it always was, and when you realize that, you stop complaining about closed doors and start learning how to kick them down. You begin to study the moves of those who made it, not to copy them, but to understand the principle. They didn't wait. They created, and you realize that's what separates the average from the great. The average wants access, the great build it. The average waits for the spotlight. The great bring their own fire. You start finding opportunity in adversity. While others retreat, you advance. While others fear risk, you embrace it. You stop seeing rejection as failure and start using it as fuel. Every no becomes a redirection. Every setback becomes a blueprint. And through it all, your mindset transforms. You stop chasing comfort and start chasing capacity. You learn to stretch. You learn to suffer. You learn to persist. Because you've realized the only thing between you and the life you want is your willingness to keep building when nobody's clapping. You stop begging people to believe in you. You believe in yourself. You stop needing applause and start trusting your work. You stop explaining your vision to small minds and start proving it through execution. You've learned that results silence doubt louder than words ever will. So you go quiet, you put your head down, you become so focused, so obsessed with becoming better, that you no longer have time to worry about who's watching, and that's when people start to watch. That's when the same ones who overlooked you start asking how you did it. But you're not bitter, you're just busy, because now you know attention is a byproduct, not a goal. You realize no one owes you a platform. No one is coming to hand you the perfect chance, and that truth doesn't break you. It liberates you, because now you know the power is yours. You control the schedule. You control the pace. You set the tone. You write the story. And if the industry won't give you a seat at the table, you build your own table, brick by brick. And when you build from scratch, when you pour sweat into your craft, your confidence becomes unshakable, not arrogant, earned, and that kind of confidence doesn't beg, it builds. It doesn't plead, it performs. It doesn't wait. It wins. You stop saying, I wish I could, and start saying, here's what I'm doing. You speak with conviction because you're living in alignment. You don't need to sell anyone on your dreams. Your work ethic does the talking. Your daily choices reflect a mindset of ownership, not dependency. You've stopped relying on luck and now rely on discipline, because you know success isn't stumbled into, it's constructed. Carefully, intentionally, with precision and patience, and you're willing to do what most won't. Stay consistent long enough to see it through. That's the mindset that bends reality. That's the mindset that creates opportunity where others see obstacles. You've learned that waiting is a gamble. Time doesn't owe you anything, so you don't waste it, you use it. Every hour matters. Every day is a chance to get sharper, stronger, more dangerous. You're not perfect, but you're progressing. You're evolving into someone who makes moves in silence and lets the results make noise. And every move you make compounds. Every day you show up adds weight to your presence, until one day the world realizes they can't ignore you. But by then you're too focused to notice, because the work has become your world. And the world is beginning to respond. You stop asking for chances and start creating leverage. You build assets, your skills, your mindset, your network, your consistency. These things compound. These things make you powerful without needing permission. And with power comes peace, the peace of knowing you don't have to wait. You can't be left behind when you're the one leading your own path. That level of self-leadership separates you from the crowd. Because most are still waiting, still hoping, still begging, but not you. You've outgrown that version of yourself. You've become the source, the force, the creator. You move differently because you think differently. And as your mindset matures, your environment follows. Opportunities begin to unfold, not because they were handed to you, but because you became someone who could command them. You don't hope for doors to open any more. You knock them down, you build new ones, and eventually people start coming to you, not for charity, but because they see your clarity. They see your value. They feel your fire. You no longer beg for opportunity. You create it. You no longer wait. You work. You no longer wish. You win because you've stopped treating your dream like a fantasy and started treating it like a commitment. And that decision alone has changed everything. You've become the kind of person who doesn't ask, "Will someone give me a shot?" You ask, "How can I build this with what I've got?" And from that mentality, from that fire, from that relentless discipline, opportunity becomes a natural outcome. Not because it was easy, but because you made it unavoidable. You silence doubt by doing what others fear. You step into the fire that most avoid. You move through discomfort when others freeze. While they wait for certainty, you act with courage. Not because you're fearless, but because you understand that fear is not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're on the edge of growth, right at the place where most turn back. But you don't. You keep walking, you keep building, you keep pushing, and that alone silences everything that once made you question. If you were enough, doubt doesn't disappear because someone gives you permission. It disappears because you did the thing anyway. While others are busy overthinking, you're over-delivering. While they second, guess, you take the first step, then the next and the next, until momentum builds and the fear that once paralyzed you becomes powerless. Not because it vanished, but because you've moved so far forward it can't reach you anymore. You become the example others reference but few can replicate. Not because of talent, but because of consistency in the face of fear. You silence doubt by taking action when it's the hardest. When there's no applause, no clear outcome, no external reward, you get up early, you stay up late, you put in the reps, you master the boring work, the unseen effort, the lonely discipline that no one celebrates. That's what separates you. That's what builds the unshakable confidence that doesn't need to talk, it just shows up and dominates. People see your results and think it was talent. They don't see the countless hours you fought through hesitation, through fear, through failure. But you know, and that's enough. You learn to use fear as fuel. You stop waiting for it to go away and start asking, "What is it trying to protect me from?" And then you move toward it anyway, because you know nothing extraordinary lives in the comfort zone. Everything worth having is guarded by fear. The question is, will you face it or will you fold? You choose to face it, over and over, and eventually that becomes who you are. Not just someone who overcomes fear, but someone who feeds off it. The more you act despite fear, the more you realize doubt was never the enemy. It was a test of how bad you want it, a test of your resilience, your grit, your hunger. Most people fail that test because they wait for conditions to be perfect. But you create your own conditions. You refuse to be ruled by hesitation. You've made a decision that progress matters more than protection, that growth matters more than comfort, that purpose matters more than popularity, and from that decision you move different. You stop needing everyone to understand your path. You stop explaining why you're going all in. You don't seek approval anymore because you've realized most people can't see the vision until it becomes reality. And when they finally do, they'll call it obvious, but you'll know it was anything but. You'll remember the sacrifices, the lonely days, the painful reps, the mental battles, the inner war that you won quietly every single day. That's what silences doubt, not noise, but evidence you don't need to argue with critics. You don't need to respond to doubters. Let them talk. You're too focused building, because results are louder than opinions. And eventually those who doubted you have no choice but to respect you, not because you asked for it, but because you earned it. Through your actions, through your perseverance, through your refusal to back down when it got hard, that's what builds legacy, not hype, not potential, but performance under pressure. You start to crave the hard things. Because you know that's where the power lies. You look for challenges that stretch you. You embrace the uncomfortable conversations. You take the shots others avoid, because every time you do, your belief grows. Not because someone told you you could, but because you proved it, and the proof builds a fire no one can put out. It becomes a frequency, a standard, a rhythm that only you can understand, because only you know how many times you had to push through, when no one was watching you silence doubt, not by talking louder, but by doing the work no one else wants to do. You build in silence, you move in silence, but your results scream. Your presence begins to shift rooms, not because you try to be noticed, but because your energy cannot be ignored. People begin to ask what changed, but you don't answer. Because there's no single moment. It's thousands of moments, decisions, sacrifices, reps. You just kept going, that's the secret. You didn't stop, you stopped needing it to feel good. You just made it happen. And now you carry that power everywhere you go. It's in your posture, your tone, your work ethic. You've trained yourself to be the one who moves forward when others pause, to be the one who dares when others doubt. And that makes you rare, that makes you unstoppable. That makes you dangerous in a world full of hesitation. You don't fear failure anymore. You fear regret. That's why you act. That's why you go. That's why you don't wait for permission. Because every day you hesitate, someone else is outworking you, and you refuse to let that happen. You've made a commitment to yourself, and that commitment silences every voice that says you're not ready, not capable, not enough. You look them in the eye and say, "Watch me," and then you deliver. Again and again you silence doubt by doing what others fear, by showing up when it's hard, by choosing the pain of discipline over the pain of disappointment. You choose to be the one who proves what's possible, not just for others, but for yourself, because at the end of the day you're not here to participate. You're here to dominate, and nothing silences doubt louder than that your energy intimidates the average and attracts the focused. The moment you decide to rise above mediocrity, you begin to emit a frequency that only the serious can recognize. It's not arrogance, it's not ego, it's certainty. It's the quiet but unshakable confidence that comes from knowing who you are and where you're going. And not everyone can handle that. Some will feel threatened by your discipline, your vision, your refusal to play small. The average fear what they don't understand. They fear those who expose their excuses. By existing as living proof of what's possible, you begin to notice who pulls away. You begin to see who becomes uncomfortable around your progress, not because you've done anything to them, but because your fire reminds them of the fire they've been ignoring. And while that might hurt at first, you learn not to dim your light to keep others comfortable. Because you weren't born to blend in, you were born to lead, and leadership isn't always welcomed by the masses. It's often misunderstood, but you're not here for their approval. You're here for impact. You're here to become the highest version of yourself, even if that means walking alone. The focused, however, recognize something in you. They don't just admire it, they resonate with it. They see your hunger, and it reminds them of their own. They feel your energy, and it awakens something dormant in them. You start attracting people who don't just talk about goals, they chase them. People who don't complain about the grind, they live in it. You start building a tribe not based on comfort, but on commitment. A circle of winners who understand the price of greatness and choose to pay it daily. When you walk in purpose, you walk differently. You talk differently, you move differently, and it doesn't need explanation. The focused already know. They recognize the discipline in your silence. They see the sacrifice behind your success. They feel the weight of your presence because they know how heavy the work is that built it. You don't need to convince them. You don't need to prove anything. Real recognizes real, and when you move in truth, the right people align effortlessly, while the wrong ones remove themselves naturally. You stop feeling guilty for outgrowing environments that no longer match your vision. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop shrinking to fit spaces that can't contain your potential, because you've learned that playing small doesn't serve anyone, not the world, not your legacy, not your own soul. And once you realize that, there's no going back. You choose to expand, you choose to evolve, and with that evolution comes separation, not because you're better, but because you've chosen better for yourself. You realize that energy is currency, and yours is expensive. You no longer spend it on conversations that go nowhere, people who drain you, or situations that distract you. You protect it, you invest it, you use it like the valuable asset it is, because you understand that energy builds momentum, and momentum shapes reality. The more focused you become, the more powerful your presence becomes. You walk into rooms and shift the temperature without saying a word. Not because you're trying to be seen, but because you've become undeniable. The average look at your consistency and call it obsession. The focused call it alignment. The average criticize your intensity. The focused respect it because they know that chasing greatness isn't casual, it's consuming. It requires full immersion, full dedication. And only those who have lived in that headspace can truly understand the mind. And it takes to keep showing up day after day. Even when the results are invisible and the praise is absent, you stop chasing validation. You don't need everyone to like you. You don't even need them to understand you. Your vision isn't up for debate. It's a mission, one that you wake up to serve every single day. That's what makes you different. That's why your energy has gravity, because it's not built on trends or hype. It's built on truth, on fire, on the unrelenting desire to become what you know you're meant to be, even if no one claps, even if no one sees, even if no one helps. The more you focus, the more noise you eliminate. You realize that average is loud because it has to be. It thrives on distraction, drama, and delay. But when you're focused, you become dangerous. You become silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're too busy doing, too busy growing, too busy building a life so solid, no outside opinion can shake it. That's what power feels like, not the kind that flexes, but the kind that endures, that executes, that dominates in silence until success becomes undeniable. You don't lower your standards to be more relatable. You raise your vibration to attract the kind of people who match your energy, who respect your grind, who celebrate your progress without feeling insecure about their own. These people are rare, but they exist. And you'll find them once you stop entertaining the ones who can't handle your growth. Once you stop watering down your ambition for those who gave up on theirs. Your light will always bother those who live in shadows. That's not your problem. That's their mirror. You move through the world knowing you've earned every ounce of who you're becoming. You've paid in hours, in pain, in pressure, and it shows, not in what you say, but in what you do, in how you hold yourself, in how you show up for your life when no one's watching. That's the kind of energy that can't be taught. It can only be forged in silence, in struggle, in the relentless decision to never settle. That's why it intimidates the average. That's why it attracts the focused. And that's exactly why you must never dim it. You've become the kind of person who raises the standard in any room you walk into. You don't need to demand respect. It follows you. You don't need to chase opportunity. It finds you, because energy doesn't lie. And when yours is built on truth, sacrifice, and obsession, it speaks volumes. Without a word, without a title, without approval, You've become the storm that the weak avoid and the strong respect, the one who keeps rising regardless of resistance, and in doing so, you've become the example the average can't understand. But the focused never forget reality bends not to luck, but to your persistence. It does not yield to wishes, hopes, or empty affirmations. It obeys the one who refuses to quit, the one who shows up again and again, even when nothing seems to be working, even when doors close, when critics laugh, when the road stretches longer than expected. The world doesn't hand success to the most talented or the most connected. It hands it to the most relentless, the one who wakes up hungry, the one who doesn't need a crowd to stay committed, the one who keeps pushing long after others have surrendered to comfort. Persistence is the silent weapon of champions. It doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't need applause. It just keeps going. While others flinch at setbacks, you adapt. While others crumble under failure, you study it, you build on it, you convert every no into another reason to keep moving forward. You don't retreat, you reload, because you know that nothing real is built on the first attempt. It's built in the repetition, in the unseen hours, in the lonely nights when you're working while the world sleeps. The truth is, life tests you. It doesn't ask how badly you want it with words. It asks with resistance. It asks with delay, with struggle, with silence, and most people take that as a sign to stop, but not you. You know that resistance is a sign you're getting closer, that pain is not a punishment, it's the process, that the delay is not a denial, it's a demand for a stronger version of you, and that's why you persist. That's why you keep striking the same stone over and over until it breaks. Not because it looked promising, but because you decided it was yours. Luck is what people see after persistence has already worked its miracle. They see the results and assume you were lucky. They don't see the nights you doubted everything, but still showed up. They don't see the setbacks you endured without recognition. They don't see the moments you had every reason to quit, but didn't. That's not luck. That's war. That's grit. That's obsession with a future only you could see. When everything in your current reality told you to give up, you've realized that average people want extraordinary results, but they're unwilling to endure extraordinary pressure. They want shortcuts, hacks, instant gratification, but you've chosen the long road, the real road, the one that humbles you, breaks you, and then rebuilds you stronger. Every failure becomes part of your foundation. Every scar becomes proof that you didn't fold when it got tough. You wore the storm and walked through it. You learned how to breathe in chaos. That's what makes you unstoppable, not perfection, but persistence. Every time you rise after being knocked down, you bend reality a little more. Every time you show up tired, discouraged, or afraid, but still show up, you prove that nothing outside of you can define what's possible. Only your effort can do that. Only your commitment can shape what you experience. This is the power you hold, to outlast, to endure longer than the doubt, to push further than the resistance. Reality isn't fixed, it's fluid. It conforms to the one who refuses to be denied. You stop relying on external motivation. You don't wait to feel inspired. You show up whether it's exciting or exhausting, because you've learned that emotion is not the fuel. Discipline is. Consistency is. That's what creates momentum. That's what separates the dreamers from the doers. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need the stars to align. You need your decision, your vow to yourself that no matter how hard it gets, you will not break. You will not pause. You will not fold. You begin to expect resistance. You welcome it because you know that each time life tries to test your will, it's giving you a chance to prove that you've already decided. There's no negotiation, no halfway effort. Either you persist or you don't. And if you do, life eventually gives in. It can't ignore someone who refuses to back down. It can't stop someone who keeps rising, and when it does break open, when the success begins to show, the world will act surprised. But you won't. You'll know exactly how much it cost you start to understand that success isn't about luck, it's about leverage, and persistence gives you leverage over time, over failure, over doubt. Every hour you invest, every setback you outlast, every excuse you destroy, it all compounds. It all builds, it all bends the world slowly in your favor. The people who seem lucky are the ones who kept going long enough to see the breakthrough, long enough to create their own momentum, long enough to move from overlooked to undeniable, so you make persistence your identity. You become the one who doesn't stop, the one who doesn't need motivation because your vision is stronger than your feelings. You act with urgency because you know time is finite. You build without applause because you know the real reward is becoming who you were meant to be. And with every step, every failure, every victory, reality bends, not because you asked it to, but because you demanded it with your effort. This is the truth that most never accept. That your life will never rise above your level of persistence. That your potential means nothing without endurance. That nothing bends until you do, until you put in the reps, until you stop looking for the way out and commit to the way through. You keep going through doubt, through fatigue, through failure, because at the end of the day, reality does not favor the lucky. It kneels before the relentless. You silence doubt by doing what others fear, by showing up when it's hard, by choosing the pain of discipline over the pain of disappointment. You choose to be the one who proves what's possible, not just for others, but for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're not here to participate. You're here to dominate. And nothing silences doubt louder than that.